Support the Amigos podcast and keep the Amiga goodness flowing for just $1 a month. Visit our page at patreon.com/AmigosPodcast.
Amiga, the first personal computer that gives you a creative edge.
Amigos, the podcast about everything Amiga. Amigos is a proud member of the Throwback Network, your home for quality retro podcasts. And now, here are your hosts, Aaron Dowdy and John Bodovkar Schaller.
Hi, and welcome to Amigos. I'm John.
And I'm Aaron.
And this week we're going to talk about MicroLeague Wrestling. But before we do, we've got a couple other items to attend to. The first one is very, very special.
Ooh.
And Aaron doesn't know that I'm doing this, but Aaron had a birthday this past week.
Geez.
And so I've got him a gift that I would like to give to him on air. So Aaron,
Boat.
meticulously wrapped in an Amazon box.
Thank you, Boat. Oh, my. What do we got here? Oh, cool. Doctor Who book.
So,
I think. Is that what this is?
Yeah, I think if you'll recall last year,
I've got the first one.
I got you Warp Volume 1, and this year, I figured I'd get you Volume 2.
Look right there.
There it is, Time Lord for the Odyssey 2, right as soon as you opened it up. So that is
Thanks, Boat. I appreciate that.
no problem. That's a book written by Earl Green, who's one of my old friends from Digital Press, and he does his own podcast called the Escape Pod Podcast, which is a daily podcast about science fiction and science fact. So
Did he do the first book?
yeah, he did the first book too.
It's outstanding. I use it actually as a reference quite often.
Awesome.
Thank you, man.
No problem. So, now that we've got the birthdays out of the way, we've got some feedback. We got a lot of feedback from last week's episode.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
The first feedback comes from one of our Australian fans.
It blows my mind.
His name is Kira Prostasanovsky. And he's
Scrabble.
Yeah, he says, great work you guys are doing with the Amigos podcast. I've been listening during my commute to work here in Sydney, Australia. I've been playing the games you review in each episode. Unfortunately, my scores haven't been great. He says, I mainly play on the FS UAE emulator on my MacBook Air. I do own several real Amigas and like to hook them up from time to time. He says that he's still looking for an Amiga 3000 and a CD32 to complete the collection. And but he has a Mac Mini G4 set aside for Morph Os one day, maybe. Have you guys had any experience with this? Have you heard of Morph Os?
I have heard of it. That's pretty much the extent of what I know about it.
Well, I spent some time and looked this up because I love obscure contemporary operating systems.
All right.
And Morph Os is sort of an Amiga-like operating system. Some people think that it actually is Amiga compatible, but it's not.
Okay.
It looks kind of like Workbench, but it has a whole suite of applications that have been developed strictly for it. So it has its own discrete web browser. It has its own discrete, I mean, it's not ports of Chrome or something like that.
What does it run on?
It runs on PowerPC software or hardware. So if you have an old iMac or, any of the old Macs that run on the Motorola PowerPC chips, you can load it up on that. It is free to try, but it's $80 to buy, which is, I mean, in the days where, Windows 10 is being given away for free and, Mac OS has been free for a few years, $80 is a lot to spend.
How does the support look like on it? How many people are using it out there?
I guess it's mostly popular in Europe, though it is in English. And I didn't look at the numbers, but, I guess it's popular enough for support is continuing on it. I personally would be a little bit afraid to run any kind of serious, web applications, anything where I'd have to sign into Google or anything like that through something that I didn't completely trust. But that is out there, and I think it's cool that people are still developing operating systems.
It is neat. I wonder, though, it doesn't run, it's not Amiga compatible, classic Amiga compatible, right? And so I'm going to go on the assumption there are things being written specifically for the OS.
Yeah. Like I said, it's got... when I tried to read, I read a comment thread when the latest version came out, and basically the original column said, "Hey, this is completely compatible with the Amiga," and then of course all the comments were like, "No, it actually isn't." And then it kind of devolved into this flame war between people that liked Morph Os and people that liked Amiga OS 4.0, which I guess is another competing thing. But apparently, I guess there are some more contemporary applications that would run on the later Amiga hardware, but any of the classic games basically are not going to be compatible. You basically have to run an emulator within the operating system, which kind of
defeats the purpose.
The purpose.
Still interesting that people are out there doing that.
And if I had an old Mac, I'd definitely load it up on there just to give it a try. Anyway, Dreamcatcher. He's left us a comment on the English Amiga board, English like the British Amiga board.
All right.
And he said, "You asked on the Marble Madness episode if anyone knows which other coin-op games ran on Amiga hardware. Aside from Mad Dog McCree, which we talked about, the ones he could think of were Gallagher's Gallery." Familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
Mad Dog 2, The Lost Gold.
I read some places that did have an Amiga hardware, and some that it didn't. And I wasn't confident enough to include it, but maybe he's right. I don't know.
Yeah. And then Space Pirates. Have you heard of that one?
That's another one from, I think, American Laser Game. I think that's another one of theirs.
Okay. And Who Shot Johnny Rock?
I think that's another one of theirs.
All right.
I think those are all American Laser Games.
Yeah.
So the chances are those were probably all upgrades from McCree. Mm-hmm. And they must have made a upgrade disc that was compatible with the original Mad Dog McCree hardware, and so that's probably where that comes from. So, I looked at a couple of those, and I'm pretty certain that they had another hardware set that was not Amiga 500 based, but I couldn't confirm either way. So, but yeah, that maybe you're right. It wouldn't surprise me. Those wouldn't surprise me. The other game I've never heard of.
Right. And he just says, he's really enjoying the show. We got a lot of feedback from people just checking in, saying how much they like the show, and we appreciate all of that.
It's baffling. I can't believe how many. It's when we get mail from the UK or Australia. It blows my mind.
It is amazing that everyone is listening to us from these far flung locations.
Yeah.
Considering that we're broadcasting out of a basement in West Virginia,
in the humble hill folk of West Virginia.
But he gave us some feedback on the show. He said that he appreciates our laid back and underproduced style. Which I mean is not hard to do. And he said you don't need dozens of randomly inserted funny clips to pad it out. And I will say that I am with him on that. It sometimes annoys me when podcasts try to interrupt the action with things that, clips from too many commercials or just random things that aren't related at all in an attempt to be funny.
There's nothing funny about us.
Yeah, we are not funny.
Sorry.
I've got one more piece of feedback. And that is from our friend Flack, Rob O'Hara.
Oh,
and
right.
He basically schooled us on the Commodore 16.
Oh, good, because that was. I tried to look that up, but it's an odd little thing.
We were wrong on all counts, pretty much.
Right. Which, we up front. I think we were pretty upfront about our lack of knowledge about the C16.
It was released after the Commodore 64.
All right,
and it was designed to replace the VIC-20.
Oh, I see. I know it was they said it was for the low-end market.
Yeah. Now, I mean, the Commodore, by the time this thing was released, I mean, the Commodore was already, I mean, it was, Flack said that the Commodore 16 only cost $100, but I mean, the C64, at the time it was released, probably only cost about $200.
I know.
You think?
I don't know how long into the 64's life did that thing get popped out.
He doesn't say.
But a year?
I know that, the Commodore price dropped pretty quick.
Dramatically.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like half. It really went down. So
he says that it was released at the same time as the Commodore Plus 4. The difference being the Plus 4 had 4 productivity programs like Office built in, and the Commodore 16 only cost $100. It only had 16 kilobytes of RAM. It didn't do sprites. And wasn't backwards compatible with the C64. So
did it play any VIC stuff even? Did it do anything?
The only selling point, he says, in his opinion, was that they used the C64 mold for the case, except it's dark gray with light gray keys. So even though it's a piece of crap, it looks really cool.
Wonder if anybody does a case swap on those. Wonder if it's possible.
I don't know. That's a good
There you
question.
go, Mr. Flack. He can school us on that too.
Yeah, and
You have a super cool 64.
and just on top of all that, it didn't even come with a DB9 joystick port. The Atari
Right.
joystick port. So
Well, with no sprite support, what do you?
yeah, I don't
Text
know.
adventures.
It would be interesting to know the marketing pitch for that one.
The thing
'cause-
is, we know they made games for it. At
Yeah.
least one crew.
yeah,
So someone gave it a whirl. At
very
least.
odd. Who was it? Tinsoft? Was that?
I think it
Yeah.
was. It was. Hey, maybe there's a god awful pinball game out there for it.
And the last thing is, I just like to remind all of our listeners that we do have a Facebook page. If you go to facebook.com/Amigos podcast, that is our Facebook page. We had a couple people that wanted to like us and weren't sure where to find us, so that's where we are. And so if Facebook's your thing, that's where we are.
Yeah, we need to get some action on that Facebook page. I'd like to hear some comments and talk some Amiga on there.
Absolutely.
Would you like to comment on this week's episode? Did John and Aaron finally make their first mistake? Leave us a comment at our blog at amigospodcast.com.
All right. It's time to move on to the game. It's not time to move on to the game.
Poor absent-minded boat.
So Aaron's got a hardware segment for us this week.
This is really just a little, kind of a mini review, and it's something I've found quite useful. I've been using it more and more. For those of you out there that have an Amiga 1200, a legitimate Amiga, which is always great, there's a piece of hardware out for it. It's called the Easy ADF Pcmcia flash transfer kit. All right, it's compact flash. What this little item is, you can get them from AmigaKit.com. We're not advertising for AmigaKit.com.
But if they would like to sponsor us, we will gladly do so.
Yes. No, but it's a great little item to transfer software back and forth on your 1200. And I'm guessing, I think the 600 had a PCMcia slot on it, so it probably works on that as well. What you give for your money, it's $17, right?
Cheap.
That's one of the cheapest things they've got on Amiga Kit, if you've ever been on there. And it's just a PCMcia card with a flash, a compact flash place to plug one in, basically. And you can stick a compact flash in your PC's card slot, copy the stuff over onto it, and once you've installed the included software that comes with the card, you can stick the card into the PCMcia slot and copy it right to your Amiga. It's that simple. I've been using it to copy mod files off some old Amiga discs I had. It's tremendous. It works great. I've never had a single problem with it. The ability to copy software onto the Amiga. I've got an Amiga flash. I've got a flash card as a hard drive on the Amiga. Another thing I picked up from Amiga Kit, and it makes it easy for me to just transfer software back and forth to it, to update it, to update software, and it's been a real help to rescue the stuff off my old MP3, my old mod discs, because I've got probably 50 discs full of mod files. And we were talking about that Kickstarter last month for the disc full of music. Mm-hmm. I got to thinking I need to get back on this because I've probably got a couple hundred of these myself. I've been using it a lot. I'm making Mr. Boat up a disc as we speak of mod files, and I thought I'd give this thing a quick shout out. Again, it's $17. It comes with the card. It comes with the adapter. It comes with a disc. Flash cards are pretty cheap. You can actually buy that with it, or you can get your own. And I've not had any problem with it. The software, I haven't had a single bit of problem with that. I mean, once you install it, it's like it was born to do it. So something I'd recommend. I also noticed that Amiga Kit is selling, and this happens periodically. They're selling 1200s right now, actual Amiga 1200s.
Really?
I think they're somewhere in the ballpark of $270 before you frill it up, and they've got a ton of extra frills. You can.
Are these new old stock?
No, these are. I think they're all refurbs.
Okay.
I think pretty much the warehouses have ran dry on 1200s. You could have them customize it with flash cards and adapters and accelerators. You can put different types of workbench on it. You can, or kickstarts. You can put any number of frills. Of course, they all add up. Trust me, because I custom built one to see what it would look like, and it looked like I would be getting that one. But hey, if you're going to get an Amiga, just to tool around. I don't know if anyone, I'm sure some of our listeners like maybe had an Amiga when they were a kid or whatever. I'm sure not everyone has got an Amiga just sitting around the house like I do. Boy, it's awful good to have one, I'll tell you. And if you can get one for a couple $100, $300, I mean, it's not a cup of coffee, but it's not a ton. I checked on shipping. Shipping to America is cheap. I think it was going to be like $8 or something to get shipped.
Ooh,
it's not bad.
Unreal, considering that it costs me, like when I get a magazine from the UK, and I think it's like 4 or 5 pounds to ship one magazine.
Well, Amiga Kit, I think they have a stateside supplier.
Okay.
So if you go to AmigaKit.com, they will have a different supplier for several different countries. That I looked and saw there were 4 or 5, and I'm assuming I don't think it was like that when I ordered my stuff, but that's what the shipping was cheap. I thought, wow, that's a real good deal. On top of everything else, I mean, that's a good place to get any of your Amiga stuff. You're going to pay a premium. There's no doubt about it. They've got a good stock of stuff. But if you're ever going to get an Amiga, the 1200 is the one to get. And if you get a 1200 and you get this sort of flash transfer card, you'll be able to transfer over any ADFs, which are compressed disk files off on the Amiga format, in case you didn't know what that was. You'll be able to transfer over your music, your demos, whatever you want, and it's easy as pie, and it's simple. I know something about Amiga. I'm not a super genius when it comes to working in Workbench and moving files around. This stuff's very simple. So just a little plug for that, and we'll move along.
Awesome.
Are you enjoying the Amigos podcast? If so, please take a moment to write us a review on iTunes. iTunes is how most people discover podcasts, and by writing a review, you'll help us get to the top of the retro gaming and computing section. Thanks.
Okay, it's time for the best wrestling game called MicroLeague Wrestling
ever
produced.
You should have announced it like the Fink did. This review is scheduled for one fall.
MicroLeague Wrestling is a game, sort of. It holds the dubious distinction of being the very first wrestling game licensed by the WWF.
Which is interesting. Who'd have thunk it, right?
Yeah. Now, I'm sure that there were pro wrestling games before MicroLeague Wrestling, but
many.
I don't think that there were many on the Amiga. Do any wrestling games predate MicroLeague Wrestling that you know of on the Amiga?
Boy, I don't think so. I mean, there weren't a ton of wrestling games that I know of. Mm-hmm. Off the top of my head, I can think of maybe 4, counting this one. They're all WWF. I don't think they're. Can you think of any others that aren't WWF related? I know there's this one. There's Wrestlemania. There's it's a UK based one that I can't remember the name of, and it seems like there was one more. So there weren't that many, and this is one of them.
It is one of them. It was developed by Upfront Software. Do you know anything about Upfront Software?
Nobody does. I don't think they ever did any. As far as I can tell, they did nothing else for the Amiga.
Yeah, they closed up shop. They figured their best work was behind them, and they were never heard from again. So, Aaron, do you have some background information on MicroLeague Wrestling?
Well, from what I could tell, and it's funny, I actually have played this before on the PC or the C64. Maybe somebody had it. It was a friend of mine, so I was sort of familiar with it. It came out in '87 on the Commodore 64, so this one came out a couple years later. It took place, the actual game, from what I could tell, it looks like the footage and stuff came from somewhere in '88. It looks like the footage was the wrestling footage, at least the ring announcer parts, were filmed in either Madison Square Garden or the Boston Gardens. it's kind of hard to differentiate just from the shot that they had.
Now, you said that it looks like these videos were shot in 88. So does that mean that the C64 version had totally different capture?
It had different guys.
Mm-hmm.
You know, well, here's how I tried to look up when this footage was. Like, you got to think there's a zillion tons of WWF footage. I tried to look up when this footage was from, and I tried to narrow it down. And there were a couple of things that you could get an idea of the year. One was that Ted DiBiase had the $1 million belt. Okay, the $1 million belt was a belt he made up in character, and I believe it debuted in 88. I think it
so. That's
did.
the secret right there.
And then Macho was with Sherry, Sensational Sherry, and that would have been about the same time. The footage, it could be a mismatch of different matches. Mm-hmm. It's hard to say. But the only thing I had to go by in terms of where they were was the ring announcer, and that could be from somewhere else. But the way it's presented and stuff, the announcers, I will say that in some ways this is an excellent game. I know you're going to probably not believe me, but
I'm willing to hear you out.
Well, the presentation's really good.
True.
You get one of three wrestlers on the Amiga version. You can either play Hulk Hogan against Ted DiBiase or Hulk Hogan against Macho Man, and you can be either one. The Macho Man again is with Sensational Sherry, which is Sherry Martel as manager, and Ted DiBiase is with Virgil. When you start the game, there's nice shots of an arena. Once you pick your guys, they have promos that they cut on each other. The little updates that show up and down the screen. That's something that sort of that was a graphic they used to use back in the day. So they tried to lift that from the television show. The wrestlers, the text, they don't. I mean, if you haven't seen this game, no, it's not real motion. It's just clips that are close enough together to where it sort of looks like they're moving.
Yeah, it's
like a flip book.
Yeah, 3 or 4 shots. Flip book is also doing it too much.
Yeah, a really bad flip book.
It's really just shots, 3 or 4 shots if you can imagine, taking 3 pictures of one wrestling move, and so you see, like, for example, if it's a body slam, you've got a shot of him trying to lift him up, a shot of him up in the air, and then a shot of him being slammed to the ground.
Right. But they do a little promo. You get to see see a promo, and then from one wrestler, then a promo from the other guy he's wrestling, and then I think they even flash back for a rebuttal or whatever. They've got the way they speak, the way the text is written, it's dead on. They really did a good job. I mean, someone must listen to a bunch of interviews, and like Macho's was dead on Hulk. They sounded just like something they would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the commentary was very similar to what you would expect. The commentators pretty much spoke like they're, like the character they were supposed to represent, which I thought was pretty cool. The move sets, pretty accurate for the most part. I mean, obviously they had to have footage of them doing the moves.
Right.
But I mean, they did what they did for the most part, and a little bit of wavering there. But when you start the match as a ring announcer, they play theme songs, sort of. They got Macho and Hulk's right, but I don't know what Ted DiBiase's was. I guess Ted's is sort of, they're saying money over and over, and that wouldn't translate well to a MIDI or whatever they use. They just made up a new little tune for him. It almost sounded like We're in the Money combined with something. I don't know. I don't know. You're a music instructor. Maybe you could figure out what they were talking about.
We'll have to listen to it again on the live stream and see if I can.
Oh, God. But the one I had played before, the graphics were not as good. It was in the
on the DOS. You played the DOS.
I can't remember. It might have been the C64 version I played, but it was black and whitish, pretty much. And so, they didn't look that great. These are in color.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the resolution is not bad. I mean, you can definitely tell
given what the year is.
Yeah. They take advantage of framing the screen in such a way that you only get about maybe a quarter of the screen is a picture, so they get
probably
around
not even
low
that
resolution
much.
For that. I mean, everything leading up to the match is great.
Yeah,
it's when the match starts that the game really starts to fall apart, because the game it's like rock paper scissors, except sometimes paper beats rock and sometimes it doesn't, and there's no way that you can tell why things happen the way that they do. Now, you might say, well, that's wrestling, and you'd be right. But when you're trying to actually play a game, and you're trying to work out a strategy, it helps to at least have an inkling of, what you need to do to achieve victory. How did your matches go in this?
I actually played this a lot. And this game had everything it would take to be an interesting game except for one thing. It had no gameplay that made any sense. I mean, it's as you touched on. The moves, a lot of wrestling games that are action-based, let's say WrestleFest, for example, if anyone's played WWF Wrestlefest, which is one of the top-shelf arcade wrestling game. You start off with the little moves, and you work your way up, and eventually you're doing the pile drivers and the finishing moves. I think this is sort of like that, but I've got really no way to confirm, and I've got no way to prove any sort of method to do better or do worse. It just felt like you click the button and you hope it worked out.
Yeah.
The block button, I've never successfully got it to work. The computer does. Did you ever get the block to actually...
Is that where, basically nothing happens and they say the wrestlers are just looking at each other?
Well, if you successfully block, you get health back.
Oh, no. I never...
A little bit of health.
I never got that. Actually, I think I never chose block just because I thought it sounded lame.
Well, it is lame, but I was like, man, what am I doing here? The very first game I played, I played as Hulk Hogan and lost to Ted DiBiase. Something else about this game, I think you can choose from like 10 minutes, like 30 minutes, and 60 minutes. I like to shake the hand of the guy that can sit down and play this for an hour. Let me tell you something. Even emulated, or I played on the Amiga, but I played on both actually, and it's. Even with no I/O, it's so slow.
And one thing too about the in-ring action is that even though during the intros, the wrestler theme songs play, "I'm a Real American" and "Pomp and Circumstance," once the match starts, it's nothing but crowd noise. Yeah, and it gets old.
How many times did you see the kid hold up the Hulk doll?
Yeah,
about 600 times. There's 3 or 4 canned shots of the crowd that they just revolve through as your match goes on.
And let me tell you about my first match. So I was all excited. It was Hogan versus Savage. So I chose wrist lock for Hulk Hogan, and then the computer chose stomp. So I was like, all right, here we go. Then Sensational Sherry entered the ring, and Macho Man was DQ'd before the fight even began.
Really? I never had that happen.
That was the very first match that I played. So I guess every so often, those dice roll inside the computer, and Sensational Sherry will, run in there and, run into the ring. And
did you ever have that happen again?
No, it only happened once.
That's crazy. Now, in the first game I played was Hulk against Ted. I was playing Hulk. Virgil jumped up on the ring apron and grabbed me, and then Ted DiBiase hit me with his finisher, which was I guess that's part of it, and then pinned me at the end of the match. But I never saw any sort of DQ.
Yeah,
pretty neat.
Yeah. So I thought that was.
Hey, you won.
Yeah. Now the second match I played, was the same matchup. And I landed every single blow of the match.
Really?
Yeah, just one after the other.
Well, I never did that either.
Savage, he would pick things, and I would pick things, and I landed every single one. It still took over 6 minutes to finish the game.
Yeah, it's just
this long baton death march of a wrestling game.
And you have to hit your finisher to go for the pin, right? It does take forever, and every game I played, almost I would jump out to an insurmountable lead, and then the computer would slowly start whittling away. And I was just like, oh, God, please. I played in my second game, I played Macho against Hulk and played as Macho. And one thing, something else I'll point out is after you pick a move and the computer picks a move, it'll say success underneath whoever got the move. And then the little video screen will just play a still shot of one of the wrestlers' heads. And the Macho would always amuse because he just looks so bewildered. He's like, and his hair is all frazzed out. He looks like he's been electric shocked.
Yeah, Hogan's doesn't look that much better. Just kind of staring blankly. They
all look perplexed. Like, what are we doing here? But I mean, they picked good guys too. I mean, Hulk Hogan. I mean,
the biggest guys in the game at that time.
Obviously, Hulk's had his problems now, but at the time,
Hulk, I've never heard of him.
Yeah. And then we got the Macho Man Randy Savage with with Sensational Sherry.
Now, did Sensational Sherry predate Miss Elizabeth?
No. Sherry Elizabeth was his first. Actually, that was his actual legitimate wife for a while. Sensational Sherry came later. In fact, she directly led to Macho and Elizabeth getting back together in storyline because Macho lost a career match against the Ultimate Warrior, which I believe was at WrestleMania, and Sherry got mad, and that while Macho laid there, she put the boots to him, and Elizabeth came out of the crowd and beat her up, and then they reunited, and I kid you not, there were shots of women out in the crowd just bawling their eyes out at this soap opera stuff, but in actual truth, they had gotten divorced, and I'm sure that was not a fun time too.
Right.
They actually worked together in WCW for years and years after that. So, they made it work, and unfortunately, both of them are passed away. Yeah. And so is Sherry.
Is she really?
She passed away several years ago. Yeah. So it's the wrestling curse.
Yeah.
But Hulk's still around. Ted DiBiase's still around. So yeah.
And Ted DiBiase's son wrestles now, right?
He did. He retired.
Okay.
He was a good-looking kid, bigger than his dad, but he didn't have his dad's charisma or ability to work. So unfortunately he retired, but he's doing, he's got his own thing going on. But the game I went through just for fun and wrote down some of the moves. I'm not going to go through all these, but some of them they have in common. Hulk has, most of them have punch and kick, and Hulk and Ted DiBiase have chop. Hulk, like he said, does wrist lock, which if you know anything about Hulk, you don't see the Hulk do a bunch of wrestling moves. Elbow drop, body slam for Hulk, clothesline. The big boot, which is, obviously one of his big moves. The atomic drop, another move. You don't see that one anymore, which is where the guy picks a guy and drops his butt on your knee. And then the big leg drop of doom, right? DiBiase, the best I could tell, he had something called the Wall Street Stomp. Did you ever see that get taken on? He did this, I didn't know it had a name. He just jumps up in there and stomps on you a couple times. And then his finishing move was the Crash, and I guess that's where Virgil would grab you. Virgil was his bodyguard in storyline for a while, and he would crack you upside the head and then pin you. Virgil ended up taking the $1 million belt, by the way, at one point. He ended up winning it. He's the only guy to legitimately win the $1 million belt. And then Savage, they did a good job on his moveset. Pretty much everything here. The body block, the axe handle. He does the axe handle off the top of the ring to the floor, that's what he did in real life. The knee drop, the double. He did all this stuff in real life, and the big Savage super elbow drop.
Macho was probably, wouldn't you say he was one of the biggest guys to really do a lot of aerial stuff?
He was one of the first guys I saw go from the top rope to the floor. He was not,
he wasn't lucha style craziness.
No, he wasn't.
He was a huge guy, and he was climbing the ropes a lot.
He wasn't the biggest guy, but that double axe handle off the top to the floor. That's a long drop. And I thought that's crazy. And he stuck Ricky Steamboat's neck over the fan barrier one time and came across him with the bell and put him out of action. That was a real famous storyline back in the day that led up to WrestleMania. What was it? WrestleMania 3. It was the undercard for Hulk versus Andre the Giant, and that was one of the bigger matches in WrestleMania history. Savage was a heck of a worker, one of the all-time great workers in wrestling. This game. They had a lot going for it too. It was really I enjoyed it more than I thought I would, but it was just, if it had a game, it even had. Did you notice that it had support for modem play?
Yeah, I saw that, and I was like, surely that can't be modem, but
true.
it was.
It was. And it would work. That would work.
Well, back in 1989. The kind of modems that were, this would be a perfect game for modem play because it doesn't require a whole lot of bits being pushed back and forth.
Right, yeah, and it's all to be local except for that literally that one input. If they could have implemented some system, and really, MicroLeague was their big thing was simulations. Right, I think baseball was one of their big things. If they had put some time and effort into the actual simulation of something, made any rule set, it's a missed opportunity. It's sort of lazy that they didn't.
I don't have a
down.
problem with each person selecting a move, that style of gameplay, if there is some sort of strategy behind it. If there's a way to start out with smaller moves and you gradually build up or something like that, it would have been a whole different game.
Yeah, I agree. And they had expansion discs for other computers. The C64 had one that you could add. Let me see here. You could add Honky Tonk Man versus Macho Man. You could add Hacksaw Duggan versus King Harley Race, and Jake the Snake versus Hulk, and Jake the Snake versus Ravishing Rick Rude, which that would have been neat. We didn't get any of that. The C64 version also had one of the guys you could fight was Hulk versus Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. That was, if you think about when that came out, if you're a wrestling fan, that one came out a lot earlier, and that was a big money feud back in the day when Orndorff fought Hulk.
Yeah, Mr. Wonderful was he was almost from the generation before.
He sort of was, yeah, but I mean, he stayed around. He actually trained at the WCW power plant for a while, and helped get guys like Goldberg and those guys up, ready to go to the main roster. So expansion disc would have been cool. If they'd put some out, but I guess the Amiga version just didn't do very well. There's an ST version as well. I looked at the Atari ST version. It looked about the same. I like the fact you can pick different control methods. The opening screen's kind of wacky. It's all visual pictures to pick the controls.
Yeah, it's not, of course, this was back in the day when all games came with big instruction manuals that would tell you what to do, but just coming upon it doesn't really lead you to, some of those, you can definitely tell, well, that's a joystick, but then there's a cross, and you're supposed to know that that's, the arrow keys.
Yeah, it took me a few tries to figure out what all the stuff did. Oh, we didn't mention the commentators.
Yeah.
As you play the game, you've got a running commentary. You've got, Mean Gene Okerlund interviews your guys for the promos before the match, and the commentaries, I only saw 2 sets of commentators. I read that maybe it must be on other versions that you can get there's a third set. The ones I saw were Vince McMahon and Jesse the Body Ventura, and the other one was Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan.
Right.
I read that Lord Alfred Hayes was in there. I never saw. Did you ever get him come up?
No, I only had Brain and.
They were both good. Actually, the commentary wasn't bad.
I thought that they put the same kind of thought into the commentary that they did in their promos. It sounded they said phrases that those guys said.
Right. I agree. So. I didn't have a problem with that. You could almost modernize a game like this. I'm surprised they didn't do another version of this in, say, like the 80s when or in the 90s when the full motion video thing was in full slate and put actual commentary in and put actual video footage in.
Did you ever play the WWF Vhs Board Game?
I did not. I have played the AWA Wrestling Board Game.
So this is something that I really wish that I still had. But it's basically the same sort of deal, kind of, where, you're going around the board. It's like every single VHS board game, and you reach a certain point and you push play on the thing and it shows you a little clip of a move. With full motion video, you could do the exact same thing that this game does. It's like you said, you pick your move, but you actually get to see it play out in real time. And I think they would have moved some games.
Yeah, and maybe they did put. If there could be something like that out there, but I just don't remember seeing it.
Yeah,
it seems so logical that would be the natural progression of a game like this.
Yeah, but you have to think about too. Maybe in the early 90s. I don't know. Do you think wrestling, kind of before all the Monday Night Wars and all that stuff started to heat up, do you think wrestling was kind of in the doldrums?
It was. It did peter out in the early 90s.
And so maybe that kind of coincided with when those games would have been made anyway.
You might be right. You might be right. The possibility of it, though, would be interesting. I don't know if you could do something like that on the Amiga. It probably didn't have the... Yeah, although a CD32 game almost certainly could do it.
Well, you just have to letterbox the video down to the size of a postage stamp, which is what, those games did.
Of course, if they didn't do something about the gameplay, it would have failed. That's what you've got here is... I don't even know what you can call it a game. I don't know what you call it. It's not even an interactive movie. Because at least like Dragon Slayer or something like that, you're actually altering what happens. In this, you just feel like you could just randomly hit a button and maybe you'll win.
Right.
You just don't know.
And, one of the things that I thought would have been cool if they did have the full motion video is at least, if they would have expanded the moveset, you could have learned all the moves, because I still don't know what all the moves are. I know you do, but, for example, the atomic drop, I know what that looks like, but if I didn't, if I could see it, that would be kind of cool. So I know what it was in the future.
Right. So, overall, it's a letdown. It's a novelty, that's for sure. And it's neat that the Amiga had a game like this, but you could see why they went away, because if I had paid money for this, if I'd paid $50 and went out and back in the day and picked this up and then got home and got through all the openings and stuff and then got real excited and then that was what you got, I would be pretty upset.
So we didn't have a score this week because there are no scores in this game, I don't think, right? I didn't see any scores.
No.
I did win a match. I only played 2 matches. I'm not going to lie to you.
I bet I played 5. I bet I played 5 or 6 matches. I'm so sorry.
But I didn't really miss having a score. Really, I was wanting to see all the moves, so I went down through the whole move list and saw all the different moves. And but
I wrote down my quickest win.
Oh, okay. Quickest win.
It was 6 minutes 15 seconds.
I think we probably came pretty close. I didn't write down the seconds, but I think if you're just picking a move every single time and it comes out right, because that's it took me over 6 minutes to finish when I landed every single blow. So anyway, that's MicroLeague Wrestling. We play it so you don't have to.
If you're interested in old wrestling, nostalgia. It's definitely, that's what the enjoyable part of it was, just seeing what wrestling looked like back then.
Absolutely. Next week, we are going to go back to our pinball special for the second part of our pinball special. We are going to cover 2 games. We're going to cover the second game of the Digital Illusions trilogy, which is Pinball
Fantasies.
Pinball Fantasies. And we're also going to do Slam Tilt Pinball, which is another Digital Illusions game. And I think it was the last Digital Illusions pinball game for the Amiga. So
I've heard good things.
Yeah, so look forward to that. And also look forward to our live stream coming up immediately following the podcast. Aaron, do you have anything else before we go?
Nope. Go out there and get yourself an Amiga and have some fun.
All right, until next time.
Adios.